Welcome in, peeps. Okay, first of all, it is Valentine's Day, but we will not be. It's Valentine's Day today, but we're not live, so you won't get this till after. So if you see this on YouTube and you're gonna be like, that's a cute heart sweater, but it's not Valentine's Day. It was today when we recorded. I am so excited today because I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, years actually. I met Cherie Denna at a Mount Hermon Writers Conference years ago, and we were in a class together, a mentor class together, and then we roomed together, and we'll get into that in a minute. But Cherie and I have gone through some deep conversations. We've had some really inspiring times together. We have lifted each other up. And so when this book finally came to fruition, I was like, we have to get her on the podcast and talk about this because this is right in our wheelhouse with the UnMothered, growing up in struggling homes and just wait till you hear her story. It is so amazing. So the name of her book is Beloved Outcast, The Quest for True Belonging by Cherie Denna. Cherie's mission is to empower individuals to find a deep sense of belonging and belovedness in Jesus Christ in their everyday lives. She draws from her extensive experience in women's ministry, relapse prevention, prayer counseling, and recovery to inspire audiences to remove imposters from their life. Her newly released debut book, Beloved Outcast, The Quest for True Belonging, is a must-read for those trapped in seemingly inescapable circumstances who desire a victorious life of freedom. Cherie's platform reveals the realities of living on the fringes of society, enmeshed in organized crime and the outlaw biker culture, all while following God's call to spread the gospel. She finds joy in witnessing the power of God's truth through freedom, deliverance, and healing. Cherie's influences the world through writing, speaking, women's ministry, and guiding others in sharing their hard stories. She enjoys frequent sea-habilitation, frothed coffee, yes, and exploring lighthouses with her husband. I wanted to read, I was telling her earlier, I had gotten a PDF copy of her book to just kind of familiarize, although we've sat with these stories for a while, and so I do know her story. I wanted to read part of her dedication, which she has dedicated to her sister, Jamie Ann, who passed away in 1992. I just wanted to read this one little paragraph. This book is for those on the quest for true belonging, who search for a place where they are accepted and known, who long for a place of refuge and rescue where no judgment is slung, who know they do not belong in the life they are living. It is no longer necessary to sacrifice pieces of yourself at the altar of belonging. Cherie, welcome in. I'm so excited to do this podcast with you.
Oh, girl, I am so excited we're finally here on
I
so many
know.
levels. Yes.
Yeah, it's
And
been a
and on
journey for sure.
Valentine's Day.
I know. Hearts.
Yes.
Yeah, that was ironic. And so your book is launching today and then it's available today or in March. I can't remember.
It actually is on Amazon as of today, Valentine's Day.
Perfect.
So it's out
That's a perfect
there.
day.
I just don't have it in my
Perfect.
hand yet.
I know. That's sad.
I
So,
know.
I know you're like, I need that book to show to everyone. So I wanted to start off because your journey your story is incredible. All of us that grow up with traumatic, kind of violent childhoods, we all think like we're the only ones. And then you meet someone and you go, oh, wow. Yours is a good story too, because you went through a whole different kind of thing being in the biker culture. And so I want you to tell me about growing up as a child in that biker environment and how that was different from just other kids growing up?
Yeah, well, the culture, my mom's side of the family was Sicilian mafia, and my father was born in the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area, in Alameda, in the Oakland area. He was, a teen, and he was getting into a lot of trouble, and he connected with the outlaw biker gangs. This is in the 60s, where there were biker wars, and that involved the Hells Angels and other outlaw clubs. And they literally prepared for their wars, their gang wars, in our house. And that our home was their hub. So I was surrounded by a lot of violence
Mm-hmm.
and drugs and chaos. And when you're in that atmosphere, you, especially as a child, you're conditioned to trust nobody outside of the family. Everything that happens in the house around you is to be not to be talked about, and they are the only ones you can trust. That's what you're told, not to trust anybody, not law enforcement,
Yeah.
nobody. And of course, our life was so different from all my friends. I'd go to
Mm-hmm.
school, or our neighbors, everyone lived, pretty normal life. They had homes that had nice, manicured lawns and flowering hedges. And, our home
You're like,
was
what's that?
just, motorcycles and,
Yeah.
you know, all these, outcasts of society, and
Mm-hmm.
and especially during that time,
Mm-hmm.
especially the Hells Angels, they were looked at as, I mean, they're just very, very dangerous people.
Yeah.
And
Don't.
so I felt very much like an outcast, that I was very
Mm-hmm.
different from everybody. Our neighbors would pull their curtains closed so they would not see what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
at our house. And I felt I wanted something normal.
Yeah.
I was very
It's.
attracted to goodness. When I would go to a
Mm-hmm.
friend's house and I saw how different they lived,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that. I
I
wanted
think that's
that.
what's so crazy about growing up. It's like like it's like your body knows like we're not supposed to really be in this environment. I loved how you
Right.
described in the book how I could feel the roar of the motorcycles pulling up when you describe that in your book of oh, here they come, and you're like gathering your sister, and it's like you're already in protection mode. And it is crazy because you go to other people's house, like this is your normal, but you just know
Right.
inertly that something's not right. And then you go to other people's houses and you're like, this is so different from the way I
Yes.
am growing up, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So and that stayed with me.
Yeah. Of course, it stays with you forever, really, in small parts. But so tell me when you felt the pull of God in your life as a young girl and who in particular kind of led you towards that.
The pull of God really came when I visited friends' homes, um, who had faith. I had,
Mm,
a couple of girlfriends. One family was Jehovah's Witness, one family was Mormon, one family was,
mm,
they were, Christians that I know today. And
mm.
I saw goodness. I saw goodness,
Wow.
I saw gentleness, and I felt peace. And I knew there was goodness out there. I had
Mm,
no real moment where I learned about Jesus as a young girl. All I knew about
mhm,
God was that he was a wrathful God. I
Mm-hmm.
I I watched the 10 Commandments when I was a little girl,
Scary.
right? The 10 Commandments was pretty scary. We
Yeah.
watched that every year. And
Yeah.
so that's really all I saw. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I was led to Christ and then
Wow.
I learned about Jesus and a loving God.
That's so good. And still going through a lot of hard things at that time too, but just kind of like God's kind of like drifting in there going, okay, we're going to start making some changes. So throughout the book, you explore the journey of forgiveness for yourself and others. And so help our listeners understand how that path came about and the self compassion that came about from that.
Mm. Oh goodness. It was right in the middle of my recovery, my healing. I was in my 40s. I was in my
Wow.
40s and I finally had reached a point where I knew I needed some professional help
Mm-hmm.
and spiritual help, and I found this women's support group,
Mm-hmm.
and I was waiting for my appointment to begin, my group to begin, and I picked up this local free newspaper that was in front of a 7-Eleven store. And on the cover
Mm-hmm.
of this newspaper was a story about this man who was a convicted felon and he was serving a life sentence. Actually, he was serving a life sentence. And make a long story short, um, that an attorney had came across this man's case and wanted to help him. He started doing some digging into his life and found that this man had experienced horrendous abuse from throughout his childhood growing up, and as a result of all the abuse and crimes against him, he became this
Mm-hmm.
monster and
Mm-hmm.
began, his rampage of hurting and even murdering people.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very powerful because when I read this man's story, he didn't want this lawyer to defend him. He would rather die in prison than have to go into court, sit at the witness stand, and testify and revisit everything that he had lived,
Right.
endured.
Right.
And he fired his lawyer because he
Mm.
didn't want to talk about his past. And my heart broke for this man. I
Mm-hmm.
had compassion for this man, and I thought, well, no wonder he turned out the way he did.
Mm-hmm. And let
And
me
I
make that clear.
started,
It's not compassion for what he did to these people
no,
because obviously there's
no.
victims involved. So we don't want to be
Mhm.
make that mistake of saying like it's all good, let's forgive all. It's not for
Oh
what
no,
he did, it's for looking beyond that and seeing which is it's such a different mindset because it's more of a Jesus mindset of it doesn't make sense in this world to be able to forgive someone that has done these horrific things. And so we're not saying that that's okay, but also to look beyond and see that there's always reasons behind it where when you go back into the history you realize not the excuse of why, but you understand a little bit of why, why they turned out the way they did, why no one has been there to help that person or lift them up or support them. And so then they become this evil place where they just give up and don't care. So the compassion comes from the fact of like, that is so sad that somebody literally grew up thinking that there was not one person that could save them or help them. That's where the compassion comes on, not for the thing that they've done because there's no excuse for that. And
right.
plus there's people that like have to endure that and that's not okay. But it's
Yeah,
it's such a Jesus thing, right? Of like looking beyond
yeah,
understanding what is it's like it's not understandable on this human earth, but looking
no,
beyond and seeing like just the sadness of like somebody's child was not nurtured
Right.
and cared for and then grows into an adult that does not nurture and care for others.
Right. So really compassion, I guess the my point is that compassion is what led me to forgiveness,
Yeah.
for my abusers and the people that betrayed me. And as I was journeying through this with through my faith,
Mm-hmm.
I um, was led to the story, of course, of Jesus on the cross. And his words from the cross were, Lord, forgive them, for they do
Mm-hmm.
not know what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that he did was he looked at their heart, and he had compassion on their heart, because it was the condition of their heart that caused them to do the things that they were doing,
Mm-hmm.
crucifying him. And so in my own journey, I began looking at what my stepfather, something that had happened to him that caused his brain to go haywire.
Mm-hmm.
I began, discovering the backstory more about my mom's upbringing
Mm-hmm.
and what she considered normal,
Mm-hmm.
and how that just kind of carried into her raising her own children, and some of her wounds and some of her brokenness, and how that overflowed into and extended into how she was raising her children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
And
very
we all have to
generational.
be, yes, very generational.
Mm-hmm.
It went back to, because my great grandfather was a mafia boss in Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And, that didn't stop when they came over here. And so my mom was raised in in that world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, very generational. Hmm.
Yeah. And also, what we study in trauma is how narratives are told to us from a very young age, and we tie those into truth. And so we just think that those are things that we have to carry on because that's our truth. And in reality, that's not our truth. We have to unwind that string and start something new as a new truth, because that is just old junk that has been passed on as truth to us. And it's very hard to unwind that if you don't know how to do it and if you're not aware of it. And you just think, well, that's the way my parents did it, so that's the way I should do it. And you were very much in a culture of mistrust because you don't trust anyone outside your circle. And so the narratives that were told to you are like so intertwined on so many, you've on so many levels, because you've got the mafia side, then you have the biker side, and then you have a mom who is, you know, damaged, in the sense of like she doesn't know how to break free of that. So she's redoing the same thing and then teaching you guys the same way. So that's a lot to break through. And so I know, like, when we met at Mount Hermon, it was so interesting because I love the story of how we were sitting in our cabin and I was finishing up my book and all of your stuff vanished on your Google Doc. And you were like, what's happening? And I clearly remember the panic on you, and you were just like defeated, like, I'm not going to do it. This is it. Like, it's not meant to be. Like, everything got erased. And we sat and talked about that. And I remember saying to you, like, maybe it's just a different story. Like, you don't need to have all of those other ties into it. And then that was the weekend, like, you met publishers and you met new writer friends, and everyone supported you so well. And I remember you walking away going, like, I think I have the story. And you started writing new kind of stuff, which was so exciting to see, and like watching this flourish through the years of just being clear of like, maybe that was never the story, and that maybe we pull some things from that, but also there's some new things that I want to say too of where I am now. And so I wanted to just mention that because I want to encourage other people. I met a bunch of speakers this weekend, and some of them were like, I haven't written a book yet. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to encourage people that if you have a book in your heart and it's just a heart tug, like I really think this is what I need to say, it is going to be a journey, and it isn't a straight shoot up like, okay, just going to write a book. It's super easy. Like it took me years, it took you years, and you stop and start along the way, and the journey changes. Right now, my second book is changing because the journey changed a couple of months ago. I'm writing about legacy, and I'm like, just lost two family members. So now the legacy is completely different. It has a different meaning to me. So I feel like, we continue the journey and then we tighten it up and, send it off. And then there's more books, in our head. But I just think the discouragement sometimes becomes overwhelming. But I want to encourage people because I know, Cherie, like you wanted this book out a couple years ago, and then, various things happened and you had to wait. And so sometimes you have to wait and then you regroup, and then, eventually that book will still be in print. So, how do you envision your readers connecting with beloved outcasts, and what do you hope readers will take away from this book?
We all have an inherent need for belonging. It's just human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a tendency, most of us have a tendency to search for belonging. As you mentioned from the beginning, we sacrifice pieces of ourselves at the altar of belonging. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is we settle. We settle for
Mm-hmm.
imposters, people who are not meant, their intentions are not to lead us or point us to our God-given purpose in
Mm-hmm.
life. They often derail us. They help shape us.
Mm-hmm.
But I refer to them as imposters,
Mm-hmm.
because my life was filled with imposters.
Mm-hmm.
They were not truth tellers. Truth
Mm-hmm.
tellers meaning, who I was created to be, what I was created to do, why I am here. My life distracted me from all those things and created these lies about who I was and who I belonged to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I want to connect with my readers, is identifying um, that in the search for belonging and connection, that we really need to be mindful of who we allow in our life.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we following? Who are we believing? What are we believing? Are we
Mm-hmm.
believing the lies they speak into our life? Are we following them just to belong, to be accepted? So that's really the key. The key message is rebranding the soul
Mm-hmm.
and redefining where our allegiance is, where our allegiance lies in life.
Yeah.
And so, what was the second part of your question?
No, that was just what you wanted readers to know about this book. And so,
Yeah, and
yeah.
the biggest takeaway, yeah, that's really it. And Jesus is, um, we are His beloved. When we come to Him, we are His beloved,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't just happen overnight. As far as
Yeah.
this big, beautiful, revelation. I mean, it just does, faith just doesn't work that way. It's a journey,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and learning through abiding in Him every single day and
Mm-hmm.
growing deep in a deeper, more intimate relationship with Him. That's
Yeah.
where I discover how to live out my life as His beloved,
It's so
and
beautiful.
to be mindful of my thoughts that enter my head.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual realm is real. Spiritual warfare trying to tell me, no, you don't deserve this love, or
Mm-hmm.
who do you think you are, reminding me of my past,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so, really, the life of his beloved is a more um, it's a more beautiful way of looking at ourselves,
Hmm.
right?
It's showing,
Instead of
yeah, it's showing your purpose, really. Is, he has, I love that you say, it is a battle. So we don't become Christians and then everything is hunky dory fine. It's actually, you're in a
no,
battle now. So you're in
yeah,
a battle because those things that you just said of like, who do you think you are? You don't belong here. You're not good enough. That those words never come from Jesus. Those words come
yeah,
from the enemy. God only
yeah,
speaks life into you. The enemy will speak death. And so
yeah,
when we hear those things, it is a battle to know that. I always tell people, if you're not hearing those things, you're really not moving the needle in your life, because he's like, well, I
yeah.
don't need to deal with that person because they don't even care. So I'm
Oh,
moving on. But he'll move
yeah,
into the places where we're in the battlefield saying, like, we want to talk about Jesus's love, God's love. We want to
mhm,
show the hope, the compassion. We want to move people, move the needle to a better place. And so that's, you're in a war, And so
yeah.
when you hear those voices, directly, like, that's not from God. Like, that is, directly the enemy trying to shoot us back down to remember us. But I always take my hard stories in effect of like, it's all good, because those hard stories made me who I was, to be able to speak the truth, because I've gone through some hard things and God has brought me out of them. So I think, it works together. Our hard stories are actually what give us the purpose to keep moving and telling the good news about who he is, because it's
Oh
kind of
yeah,
like the
we
woman at
don't
the
have
well,
a redemption story. Yeah, we don't have a redemption story without the hard story.
So,
The hard
so
pieces
good.
have to come. That's um, I mean, throughout the Bible, every
Yeah,
redemption
totally.
story has a hard story as part of
Yeah,
the glory side of the story.
yeah.
You
The
know,
Bible is
it's
exciting. Has so many good stories in it.
yeah.
uh,
You when you were talking about back at Mount Hermon and how I lost everything on my my computer, my files, my old files. It was so interesting because, like you said, I wanted to just throw in the towel and give up.
mhm.
And when you said maybe God would have you write from a different perspective now, compared to what was written years ago, and I thought, yeah, there is a lot of truth to that. And you and I went into our next main session there,
Yeah.
and our keynote. I wish I had her name right here in my brain, but I've lost
Yeah.
it. But she authored several novels, and she told her story right there. I don't know if you'll remember this, but she said that she had written a couple novels, and she had an agent who had a couple of publishing houses that wanted to buy her work. And at the last minute, she had Christ got a hold of her. She came to Christ, and she realized that the books that she had written didn't have uh, were not God honoring. They were Her work was not honoring God, and she didn't want the work to be out there in the world. And she had her agent put a kibosh on her books, 10 years worth of writing,
Hmm.
and she rewrote those novels from a
Hmm.
Christian perspective.
Yeah.
And I
That
sat there
message was
to
for you.
it was I remember looking at you
You're like, I
going,
could do this.
wow.
That's
And
awesome.
that was not just
Mhm.
confirmation, but
Mhm.
it was like God is here
Yeah. Yeah,
right in that
totally.
moment. He was there in
That's
that
so good.
moment,
Yeah, he will
encouraging
speak to you.
me.
That's so great. Oh my gosh, Cherie. Well,
Yeah.
that was like so many years ago, and we have bonded in a sisterhood, and this is like so exciting to see this book come to fruition. I'm so proud of you and so happy for you and excited
Mm.
for you and all the things. And so
Thank
make
you.
sure, peeps, that you go out and get this book. Go on Amazon. It's Beloved Outcast: The Quest for True Belonging. And it's wherever books are sold. And so go out and pick up that book. You are going to be so excited that you did. It's a hard journey and then a beautiful ending. And Cherie, tell us where they can reach you if they want to connect with you.
You can connect with me at my website. It's cheriedenna.com. And on all the socials, I'm on Facebook, Instagram at Cherie Denna. And subscribe to my newsletter. We're launching a new movement, Everyday Belonging. And I'm super excited to get this off the ground. And it's just a super exciting time.
Yeah, it really is. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on today. Peeps, I hope you have a
Thank
good,
you.
hey, happy Valentine's Day, but it'll be already over by the time this comes on. But have a good day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.